All right, next question. Jocko, I'm a sergeant in my country's army. The reason that I'm sending you this message is because of a tragic incident in our unit. This week, a young enlisted soldier committed suicide. He shot himself with his issue rifle. This came as a shock to all of us. He was a bright, smart, and happy guy. Damn. I'm seeking your advice, Jocko. Do you have any advice on how I, as a leader, can talk to the guys about it? How does a group of soldiers cope with a loss when the reason is so tragic? Thank you.
And obviously condolences to the team and the family of the soldier. And I think what you have to do in this situation is as a leader, you got to bring this out in the open. I think one of the worst things you can do is pretend that it didn't happen, pretend that the problem's going to go away. And I think what you have to do is you have to explain it, which is weird because in this case, explaining it means admitting that you can't explain it. Because you can't explain it, or you're not going to be able to, or you're going to be making up something that you're guessing at, right? You're not going to know what individual situations caused this to happen, because who can make sense of that? I mean, a bright, smart, happy guy, it doesn't make sense. And while you can't explain why, I think you have to address it as a reality. And I think you got to address it as something that your platoon needs to fight against, just like they would fight against the enemy. What is the threat? The threat is depression. The threat is loneliness. The threat is helplessness. The threat is feeling like there's no way out. And being aware of those threats is what allows recognition of the enemy so that you can fight him. So I think you got to talk about this with your guys. I think that they will become aware of what they need to look out for in others and in themselves. So they can alert the platoon that, hey, if you guys talk to Johnny, man, Johnny seems a little off right now. We should check in on him. We should talk to him. Or self-recognition. Man, I'm feeling like depressed about something. I'm feeling dark. I don't know what I'm going to do. Right? And on that last podcast that we did, I read a couple excerpts in words from some various combat veterans. And I touched on the fact that several of them from different times, from different wars, had written the same thing. And they wrote basically that death would be liberating. And that it would be an escape from the hell of war or from the memories of war. And I should have hit on that harder. Because I think that what that means to me, what that tells me, is that having those thoughts doesn't necessarily mean that there's something wrong with you, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that you're losing it. These, the writings that I'm talking about, the book, and then the writing from a guy that I knew, doesn't mean that you're losing it. And I think that people think to themselves, "Oh, I'm thinking about how death would be an easier way right now," and they think that by thinking that they're totally screwed up. When I think the reality is the reality of the situation is that that's obviously a fairly normal thing to think about. And, I when I was in Ramadi, I definitely, I wasn't thinking about killing myself, but I definitely saw that dying in combat would be a relief to the stress that I was under, no doubt. And I didn't want to die, but I'll tell you what, we joked about it. I joked about it with Leif. I'd be like, hey, if we get in a firefight tonight, first thing I'm gonna do is crack a green chem light on my chest so the enemy knows exactly where I am. It's like, we're joking because we're under a lot of stress. But I think my what I'm trying to say is that those feelings or those thoughts don't mean that you're done. They just mean that you're human. They just mean that you're human. And I think if you keep them bottled up, then they might explode. So that's what I think you need to do. That's what I need to tell your men, that these thoughts happen and that your platoon, your team, needs to be on guard against them. And the best way to be on guard is to be vigilant, to look for the signs, to look for behavior and talk about them. And then be able to ask for help. It's one of the big problems. Is guys don't want to ask for help because we're macho.
Yeah.
I don't need help with anything. Our egos are too big, so we don't ask for help. And so we have to put our egos in check. We got to pay attention to each other. And there's going to be some people that you're going to have to pry this out of them, right? They're not going to willingly talk about it. So I think that's what you have to do so that you can get somebody some professional help. I'm not a psychiatrist, obviously, and in a normal infantry platoon, there's no psychiatrist in there. But you need to recognize, because you're the first line of defense, and how can you get that somebody to a professional that can help them? And to be honest with you, this doesn't only apply to soldiers, right? It applies to everyone. Don't let these thoughts fester in your brain. You got to get them out. You got to put them out in the light, right? You got to put them out in the light so they dry. They're like a vampire. They dry up and they wither and they turn to dust. You know, that's what you want to do. You want to expose them so you can get the professional help and get things under control. So that's the leadership. Be straightforward with your troops. Tell them the truth. Explain the enemy threat. That's what we're talking about. And how you as a platoon are going to look out for it. And then obviously you got to grieve the loss. You got to mourn your fallen comrade. And then you also have to get back to work. Get back to soldiering. Get back to preparing for the enemy that you will face on the battlefield with a new awareness that there's another enemy that can lurk inside the platoon and inside the individual, and that you have to protect each other just like you protect each other from a real enemy. So that would probably be the route that I would go. Good luck, brother, with that. It's a hard one, for sure.